our first speaker, Tayab Ali, who's the director of the International Center for Justice for Palestinians and an internationally recognized solicitor advocate. His practice encompasses criminal and civil public law in both the UK and international jurisdictions. He's a partner at leading London law firm Bindmans LLP. He'll be talking through a pre-recorded video message about pursuing perpetrators of war crimes and genocide in Palestine. Obviously, he was unable to join in person due to work pressure on the Palestine front, so we'll let it pass this time round. So over to Tayab Ali.
Hi, my name's Tayab Ali. I'm the founder and director of the ICJP, the International Center of Justice for Palestinians. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to the meeting arranged by Cordova Foundation. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person. I would, if I could, be there, and I'd like to participate in the panel because I think the topic of breaking the cycle of violence, or even the cycle of Israeli violence in Palestine, Israel, is really important. I'm going to start by saying it's not just really important for Palestinians, it's also really important for people living within Israel. And the reason I say that is because the discussion about what's happening on the ground all too often is one-sided. And what we're seeing right now is an asymmetrical war, where one party with massive power and support from the international community is pummeling the lesser party in terms of strength. And that is a cycle that can't continue. I've spoken for a long time as a commentator about the situation in Israel and Palestine. I'd like to talk today about my role, not just as a leading international human rights lawyer and criminal lawyer, but as the director of the International Center of Justice for Palestinians. So the International Center of Justice for Palestinians is an organization populated by lawyers, academics, and politicians. And together we examined and analyzed what we consider to be the primary issue with regards to the continued cycle of violence in Palestine. And we established that the main problem for us was the simple asymmetrical relationship between the two parties there, the Israelis and the Palestinians. And what that means is that when you try to apply law or principles of justice to the various actors in the region, you have a situation where one group is dealt with harshly and in accordance with the rule of law and international law, often by third states, and in violation of international human rights law by Israel. And where Israel violates international human rights law, there is absolutely no accountability for them. That asymmetrical relationship, that lack of accountability, is the reason why you can't bring both parties to a table with any hope of a realistic peace agreement. Because where you have one party that holds all the cards and one party that doesn't, why would the party that holds all the cards ever give anything away? Until we create a system in Palestine, Israel, where the rule of law and principles of justice applied equally to Palestinians and Israelis, we will not have a political solution. But what we will have is a continued cycle of military violence, as we've seen so far. And ICJP is working very hard to try to intervene on that. And I'm just going to explain to you where ICJP came from. The ICJP originally, the idea of it started before 2009. In 2009, I was part of a legal team that applied for an arrest warrant for Tzipi Livni. Tzipi Livni was a former foreign minister in Israel who was part of the war cabinet that made the agreement or made the order to the Israeli military to make the first strike during Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. And what they were accused of doing was attacking a civilian police station. We took evidence from that police station, expert evidence that we collated on the ground, witness statements that we collated, and we worked in London with Scotland Yard and the Crown Prosecution Service to some degree, but the application was led primarily by private individuals and private lawyers. We attended Westminster Magistrates Court presenting our evidence, and the magistrate in court agreed that what we had demonstrated was a prima facie case for war crimes and issued an arrest warrant for Tzipi Livni. Following that really successful and very important marker in the legal history of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, British politicians in the UK worked tirelessly, not for accountability for Israeli aggression and war crimes, but to protect alleged war criminals and suspected war criminals. They issued an immunity certificate protecting Zippy Livni. Not only did they do that, they also changed the law to make sure that when private citizens applied for an arrest warrant, there would be political interference in that by way of consent from the Attorney General and the Director of Public Prosecutions. So we created, a few years later, the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians. And the reason we created that was because we wanted to make sure that there was a scheme and a system where we could hold Israelis accountable for violations of international law. And we do that. So for the last couple of years, the ICJP has been actively putting together applications to the International Criminal Court, making representations to the United Nations, making representations to local legal political institutions. And we've done that quite successfully over the last couple of years. For example, one of our cases that we worked on quite strongly was, and continue to work on quite strongly, was the attack by the Israelis, targeted attack on journalists in Palestinian occupied territories. And we represent, for example, the family of Shireen Abu Akleh. We've submitted complaints to the ICC on her behalf, or her family's behalf. Let's go to Israel's response to October the 7th. We predicted, and we were right, that Israel would not be restrained in its response on Palestinians. What we've seen happen in Israel goes far beyond any understanding of the concept of self-defense. And what we saw as well, really worryingly, was that politicians in the United Kingdom, both in the Conservative and Labour Party, were supporting Israel's unrestrained action and using terms such as Israel has the right to self-defense, which of course it does. Israel has a right to respond, of course it does. But it only has a right to self-defense, and it only has a right to respond in accordance with international law. What Israel was doing appeared to be way beyond any notion of self-defense and appeared to be something that contravened international humanitarian law. The problem for politicians in the UK, we recognized within the first week of Israel's campaign, was that they were potentially breaching their obligations under the Rome Statute, Article 25. Article 25 of the Rome Statute makes it a criminal offence, makes it a war crime, in fact, for a person to aid and abet or in any other way support war crimes. This includes encouraging war crimes. And what we found was that politicians in the United Kingdom were either intentionally or recklessly coming very close or even committing this particular war crime by aiding and abetting. So what we decided to do was to politely, in letter form, remind politicians of their obligations in international law. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, politicians completely ignored our letter. Very shortly after that, we decided to issue notices of prosecution to British politicians and politicians across the globe with regards to what we saw they were doing in terms of violating the Rome Statute. After we issued notices of prosecution for British politicians, we noticed that their rhetoric changed. They started to call on Israel to be restrained and abide by international humanitarian law. We didn't see Israel being restrained by the words of politicians. And in some instances, some politicians continued to support Israel in what we perceived as being war crimes. So following these initial steps that we took, we decided to launch ICJP's Justice for Gaza campaign. We decided to support evidence gathering on the ground in Gaza, as well as everywhere else in the world where we could obtain evidence. So, for example, we spoke to people on the ground in Gaza. We asked them to gather evidence, photographic and video evidence of the atrocities that they were seeing on the ground. And we had that evidence passed back to us. But since people have come out of Gaza, we've now interviewed them. We've taken direct witness statements from them. And we are compiling a series of cases against Israel for what we consider to be evidence of its commission of war crimes. This is really important work. It's painstaking work. It's expensive work. And the work that we have a small investigative team based in London, and that investigative team is working with lawyers to identify the best mechanisms to gather that evidence, secure that evidence, and save that evidence. And you'll have seen this week that I attended Scotland Yard with Professor Ghassan Abu Sitta, who is a renowned, award-winning war surgeon who was on the ground in Gaza, physically saving lives with his hands, conducting amputations. He brought back to the United Kingdom very recently eyewitness evidence of what was happening in the hospitals, what was happening in terms of the injuries that he was treating, what he witnessed in terms of Israel's attack using quadcopter sniper rifles, and also the massive number of children that he was treating and women that he was treating. And he brought that evidence back, which we secured. We secured video and photographic evidence from him, and we delivered that this Monday to Scotland Yard counterterrorism officers, which house the war crimes investigation team in it. So he's been debriefed by them. I don't want to talk any more about that, but this is a first step in our accountability process. We are continuing to secure significant evidence about war crimes with regards to a specific list of suspects. The suspects include, but are not limited to, Israeli military and political actors, political commentators and political stakeholders outside of Israel, wherever they might be, whether they're in the United Kingdom or elsewhere. But we're also investigating British citizens that may have joined the IDF and where there's evidence that they could be participating in potential war crimes in Gaza. The offences we're investigating are the offences of crimes against humanity. We're investigating war crimes. We're investigating genocide. Now, we've heard significant statements said by senior political actors in Israel, including Benjamin Netanyahu, which give us evidence that what Israel is intending to do with Palestinians is far beyond war crimes and potential evidence of an intention to commit the act of genocide. We are building that case, and we will be passing that evidence to the police in the United Kingdom. But we won't just stop at passing the evidence to the police in the United Kingdom. We're going to make sure that our evidence is available to the International Criminal Court so that Karim Khan can do the job that I'm trying to do, which is to hold Israel accountable for alleged war crimes. But it doesn't stop there. We're going further than that this time. We at ICJP are going to create evidence packets suitable for prosecution of suspected war criminals in Israel. With those packets of evidence, we are going to make sure that every law enforcement agency in the world receives those packages of evidence and is supported in holding Israeli war criminals and politicians from other countries that supported that crime accountable anywhere in the world. And it's a really important step that's not been done before, but we're committed to doing that. We need to break this cycle of violence. The way to break the cycle of violence is not through military intervention. It's through lawful accountability and the rule of law. If we don't create a system where Israelis and Palestinians are held to account to the same legal standard, there will never be any solution in that region but a perpetual cycle of violence. Thank you for having me for the few minutes that I've been able to speak to you. I do apologize again for not being there. The type of event that Cordoba are hosting is crucial. I wish I could participate. I hope I'll be able to participate on another occasion. Thank you.